Welcome back to another episode of Faith, Purpose, and Leadership. This is episode number 14, and it's going to be a sermon that I gave in July of 2026 at Church of the Open Door based on Ecclesiastes chapters 7 through 9. So I hope you enjoy it. I've entitled this message, The Teacher No One Wants. One day, you are going to die. Statistically speaking, 10 out of 10 people die. But I know that's not your first thought every morning when you wake up. It might not even be something you think about on a weekly basis. Maybe you've even gone months without thinking about the day you are going to die. This truth shouldn't surprise you, though. It's a fact of life. But we don't think about it very much, and none of you know when that day will be or how you will die, but that day is coming. You and I will eventually die. And the writer of Ecclesiastes is going to encourage you to think about this reality today and how to think about it with wisdom. Well, Garrett, you should be a motivational speaker and lead with that. Well, if this sounds depressing, hopefully, by the end of this message, you won't feel that way. A few years ago, my dad introduced me to a comedian named James Acaster, and he has this bit where he talks about being at a party and meeting new people, and he goes on to say that he's heard the advice to have a good icebreaker at the beginning of a conversation, to help loosen the other person up so you can have a pleasant interaction. But he doesn't like the fact that he's going to do all the hard work of breaking the ice with someone who's going to then go on and continue to have pleasant conversations with everybody else. So he recommends freezing the person back over before they go on talking to other people. He says, you don't want anyone else sweeping in, taking advantage of all the lovely little ice cubes that you've created. So freeze it over again before they leave. So just as they're ending the conversation, all right, great talking with you. I'm going to go chat with some other people. You should casually just say something like, "Yeah, it was great meeting you too. And remember, death comes to us all." And then just turn and leave. Death comes to us all. I even found a picture of a happy birthday card online with his punchline, "Happy birthday, death comes to us all." In some ways, that's what I feel the author of Ecclesiastes does to us. Most scholars agree that the author of Ecclesiastes is King Solomon, but he refers to himself as the preacher, so that's how I'll refer to him on this podcast. Several times throughout the book, the preacher says stuff like, enjoy your food, enjoy your drink, and enjoy the woman you married, and enjoy the work of your hands. And almost in the same breath says, death comes to us all. If you look in your Bible at the end of chapter 8 in Ecclesiastes, you'll see verses about enjoying life and enjoying food and drink. And then when you look down at chapter 9, a lot of Bibles have headings, and the heading of chapter 9 is death comes to all. He says in chapter 8, I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful. And then chapter 9 hits. Death comes to all. Thanks, preacher. Can you see some similarities between the comedian and the preacher here? So what are we supposed to do with this wisdom? After studying this book, I believe that the preacher is trying to introduce you to one of the best teachers on how to live life well. On the day you were born, you were enrolled in the school of life. And death is like that teacher that no one wants. Do you resonate with that? Do you have a teacher in mind from when you were in school that no one wanted to learn from? For me, I remember leading up to my fifth grade year of school, I was praying for the rapture that summer. I prayed that Jesus would come back and kick off the apocalypse because I was so scared of having Mrs. Heyman as my homeroom teacher. And then I remember getting to college at Bloomsburg University, and several people encouraged me to drop my English class because Professor Danny Lee Robinson was ruthless with his grading and expectations. But after being in their classrooms, I can say that I was so blessed to be on the receiving end of their teaching and gained so much wisdom from what they had to share. And I still get together with my English professor from time to time, and we just sit down and have really good conversations, and just so grateful for his friendship. But sometimes the toughest teachers are the ones who help you grow the most. If you're a teacher right now and you're listening, first of all, thank you. It's such a noble profession to be in. But also, I'm wondering if you are a teacher, do you know if you have that reputation as being one of the tough teachers or the teacher that no one wants? And if you are, I'll say good for you because I've titled this message, The Teacher No One Wants. We're going to be looking through Ecclesiastes chapter 7 through 9 and look for wisdom from death, the teacher no one wants. And the teacher that no one wants is actually the teacher you need the most. Throughout Ecclesiastes 7 through 9, we're going to see three movements of wisdom that the preacher wants to help you grasp so that you can live this life well. I'm going to start with Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 1 through 4. A good name is better than a good ointment, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, because that is the end of every man, and the wise take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for when a face is sad, a heart may be happy. The mind of the wise is in the house of mourning, while the mind of fools is in the house of pleasure. Well, here's what the preacher is not saying. He's not saying that death is good or that we should celebrate the fact that people die. He's not saying that death is enjoyable. In fact, in chapter 9, verse 3, he refers to this eventual end as an evil, and that this evil, death, is the fate of all mankind. But he is saying the day of death is better than the day of birth, because that's where we find wisdom. He is saying that the day of death is a better teacher. Death itself is bad, unfortunate, it's frustrating, it's sad, but death comes to us all. However, if we pay attention to death, if we come face to face with death, and if we can contemplate our own day of death, the preacher says you will find wisdom, wisdom for life, wisdom for living life well. Some of you know this teacher far better than you wanted to. Maybe you've sat by hospital beds, or you've walked beside a casket, or maybe you've buried someone you love. The preacher is not celebrating grief. He's asking the question, what did death teach you? When a wise person is sitting in front of a casket, they will think about their eventual day of death and have a few wise questions emerge in their soul. What will people think about me when I'm gone? What will I feel like I'm ready to go because I've lived a good life? Am I living a good life right now? How will people remember me? I'm going to die one day. Maybe I should stop doing fill in the blank. Or I hope I get to fill in the blank before I die. The day of birth is wonderful. It's a time of celebration and new life. You think about the possibilities and potential and who this little one will become and what they'll accomplish. The day of death is better because it reveals what's most important in your life. Attending a funeral has the power to shape your priorities. Death teaches you how you should be living now. When you consider death, when you think about it, it has the power to set new trajectory for your life, and hopefully for the good. And that's the preacher's message. He wants you to imagine death walking into the room, pulling up a chair and says, "Sit down. We need to talk about your life." Isn't this idea just like some of our favorite movies and stories? And as the preacher says, there's nothing new under the sun. But when you think about the Christmas Carol, the ghost of Christmas yet to come functions almost exactly like death. Scrooge is shown his own grave, and the point of that wasn't fear. The point is transformation. And then in that way, death becomes his teacher. Without seeing death, Scrooge never really lives. So, time to wake up, Mr. Scrooge, and turn it around. It's the same thing from another Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey got visited by his guardian angel, Clarence Oddbody, angel, second class. And Clarence did a total death move. And he showed George what this world would look like and who people would become if he was never born. Other movies like The Bucket List, Coco, Soul, Meet Joe Black, and many more, they have this idea where in literature and film, death is not always portrayed as the enemy or the villain, but as a guide, teacher, companion, and friend. And there's this really cool line from the short story, The Tale of Three Brothers. The first brother fights death. The second tries to undo death. The third accepts death. And then there's this beautiful line. He greeted death as an old friend and went with him gladly. Death is accepted as part of wisdom. Death asks you the question, what kind of person am I becoming? So in movement one in these passages is that death wants to become your teacher. In this first movement in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, the preacher is encouraging you to sit in death's classroom and learn about life. Accept this teacher. Be friends with this teacher. Don't ignore what death has to say. Don't skip class. Lean in and learn. Death is one of God's greatest teachers because it reminds us what actually matters the most. All right, we're going to continue with Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verses 7 and 8. If no one knows what will happen, who can tell him when it will happen? No man has authority to restrain the wind with the wind, or authority over the day of death. Now let's drop down to verse 17. And I saw every work of God. I concluded that man cannot discover the work which has been done under the sun. Even though man should seek laboriously, he will not discover. And though the wise man should say, I know, he cannot discover. After you've accepted death as your teacher, the second movement asks the question, what is death trying to teach us? The answer and the lesson is not primarily you're going to die. The lesson here is control is an illusion. Death is whispering to you, you are not in control. You are not in control. The preacher tells us no one knows the future. No one has authority over the day of death. Nobody knows what is going to happen tomorrow. Nobody controls the wind. Nobody understands everything God is doing. God is in control, and we can see all his work being done under the sun, but you and I can't find it or understand all of it. We think we know this or that, but ultimately, so much of life is out of our control, and that is a hard lesson for us. Why? Because we love being in control. With how hot it gets outside in Pennsylvania with all the humidity, I love being in control of the thermostat. And my wife and I have different ideas about what a comfortable temperature is in our home, but I really love her and she's been great letting me crank that AC. What I want you to do right now is think about your average Tuesday. How much of your day is spent trying to control things? Your schedule, your kids, your health, your finances, your reputation, the driver in front of you going 5 miles under the speed limit. Speaking of driving, maybe you're driving right now. And I want you to think about have you ever been involved in a car accident that was not your fault? You were obeying the rules, you were driving perfect, but somebody else messed up and crashed into you. It's not fair. But in that moment, you realize that you're not in control, no matter how good of a driver you are. You're not in control of life. And if you've never been involved in an accident, it maybe at least you've driven past a serious car accident. On a recent work trip to Alabama, on our way back to the airport, we passed two accidents at the same point in the highway on both sides of the medium. There was a total of six cars involved, and it just made me think, what happens when you drive past an accident? almost instinctively, without thinking about it, your foot comes off the gas. You slow down. Your both hands are on the steering wheel. You sit up straighter. You continue down the road a little slower. Maybe you're checking your mirrors more and looking at what other people, you're paying more attention to how other people are driving around you. Why do we do that? Nothing happened to you. You didn't crash. What changed? Nothing really changed except the awareness of reality. For a moment, the illusion of control disappeared, and you hear death whisper to you again, you are not in control. That's what the preacher's saying. You don't control tomorrow. You don't control everyone else. You don't control when tragedy comes, and you aren't in control of the day of your death. Why do you and I crave control? We think that if I can predict this, then I can prevent that. And if I can understand this, I can survive that. And if I can just manage these things over here that seem out of control, then I won't get hurt. But the preacher lovingly dismantles that illusion. He's not trying to make you feel helpless, but he is trying to free you from carrying a burden you were never meant to carry. You and I will never understand all that happens. And you and I will never be able to control everything. God is in control. He knows everything. He understands all that is happening under the sun. We can see that God is working, but we rarely get to see what he is doing. And in a lot of ways, that's a blessing. You and I are like the you and I are like the 4-year-old sitting in a cart at the grocery store while mom pushes you around. And you might think to yourself, Mom's taking forever. And you don't know where you're going. You don't know why she stopped here. You don't understand the list she made. You don't understand the budget. You don't understand why she's buying broccoli. Ugh. But she does. She knows. She understands. You don't have to because you're a child. And that's us. We're constantly looking up at God and asking, what are you doing? And the preacher responds, you're asking this question from inside the shopping cart. You and I are under the sun. God is above the sun. You and I live under the sun, and we cannot see the big picture. You're not in control. You don't understand everything, but you can trust that mom knows what she's doing. And she gives you her presence. She gives you her words, and maybe she even sings you a song while you're shopping. And she loves you, and she just wants you to enjoy the ride. Maybe she even got you one of those carts with a toy car in front, the one with the fake steering wheel that lets you think you're in control. You keep trying to turn the wheel to go to the candy aisle, but mom is headed back to produce to get that broccoli. And you and I make our plans, but God directs our steps. Amen. You don't understand the shopping list, but you know your mom. And sometimes knowing the one pushing the cart is enough. The crazy thing is that you and I spend enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to control things that you were never promised control over. Well, often we neglect the things that God actually has placed in your hands to be a good steward of. Which leads me into the third movement of Ecclesiastes. If death is my teacher, and wisdom from death teaches me to stop pretending that I'm in control and to stop trying to control everything, the obvious question becomes, okay, well then how am I supposed to live? Go. That's where the preacher takes us next. He's not going to say, sit around and think about death. He doesn't tell you to live in fear. He doesn't say, withdraw from life. He says, go. Let's continue in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, starting in verse 7. Go then, eat your bread in happiness, and drink your wine with a cheerful heart. For God has already approved your works. Let your clothes be white all the time, and let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life, and in your toil in which you have labored under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. for there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you are going. I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle not to the strong, and neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to men of ability, for time and chance happen to them all. Ecclesiastes 9, 7 through 11. The final movement in this section of Ecclesiastes is pleading with you to treat today as a gift from God. Receive this life and this very moment as God's gift for you to enjoy. That's really all you have right now. You don't have tomorrow. It's not promised. So, movement three, go enjoy God's gifts. Show up and do your best work. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Consume your food and drink with a joyful heart. It is a gift. Enjoy your spouse, enjoy your work, dress up, look, and smell pretty. Death is coming, and you can't control or understand so much of this life. But the opposite of control is the preacher is not saying that it throws us into chaos. No, it's gratitude. Death is trying to get you to loosen your grip on control so that you can open your hands and receive today, to enjoy today. It is God's gift to you. Food isn't just calories that I need to log in my Lose It app. Food is a gift. Marriage isn't just a commitment, it's a gift. So enjoy your marriage, and sometimes you need to put in the work to enjoy it. But work isn't a punishment either. Work is a gift. Friends are a gift. Your breath is a gift. And the preacher doesn't want you to worship these things. He wants you to receive these things and enjoy them because they come to you from the hand of God. This should cause you to worship the giver of every good and perfect gift. Tomorrow is not promised. You are not in control. So go. Go and enjoy this gift of life. Sometimes we let our fears or inadequacies keep us from showing up and doing good work or enjoying life or pursuing something. Maybe you think to yourself, I'm not even going to attempt this goal. Or if tomorrow isn't promised, maybe I should just not even try to fill in the blank. That's not the message the preacher wants you to believe. The preacher wants you to go for it. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Even if you don't think you're going to win, work hard and enjoy it. You never know what could happen. And then the preacher drops this beautiful verse. I already read it, but I want to read it one more time. I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the strong. And then he ends this verse with, for time and chance happen to them all. You might not be the fastest, but show up at the race and run. You never know what could happen. You might not be the strongest, but show up for the battle and dig in. You never know what'll happen. Time and chance happen to you and I, everybody. Life is unpredictable. I don't know if you've heard of Stephen Bradbury, but he's an Australian speed skater, and his story perfectly captures the wisdom from this verse. His story has become so famous that in Australia, there's a phrase called doing a Bradbury, which means succeeding because everyone else messed up. Here's why his story went so viral. In the 2002 Winter Olympics, Bradbury was not expected to get a medal. His career nearly ended because in 1994, another competitor's skate sliced through his thigh. He lost nearly 4 liters of blood and required 111 stitches and 18 months of recovery. Then in 2000, he crashed into the wall during training and broke his neck. Doctors questioned whether he'd ever skate competitively again. Most athletes would probably have retired. But Bradbury spent significant time training to do what he loves, which is getting back on the ice. So in the preliminary heat for the Olympics, he skated pretty well. But in the quarterfinal, only 2 skaters would be allowed to advance. Bradbury crossed the finish line in third place, which means he could not advance. This meant that the Olympics for Bradbury was over. However, a skater named Mark Gagnon, the defending world champion speed skater, was disqualified for illegally obstructing another skater. So Bradbury suddenly moved from third to second place. He was able to advance. Time and chance? Yes, absolutely. But he still had to show up and do his best. He had to skate with all his might to get close enough to benefit from this disqualification. So here's where it gets interesting. Bradbury talked with his coach and realized something. I'm not the fastest anymore. Because of his age, he was several years older than the other skaters, and his injuries, he was aware that he couldn't outskate these guys over multiple rounds. So they changed strategies. He understood the nature of speed skating and that it was one of the most chaotic Olympic sports. High speeds, tight corners, people are inches apart from each other, aggressively skating and passing each other. So he and his coach agreed that he would hang back and play it safe. Just enjoy skating and that you made it this far. No sense of risking another injury. So the semifinal begins. Bradbury hangs back. In the final lap, three skaters collided into each other, and Bradbury glides past them. He wins the semifinal. So now it's the finals, and there's five skaters total. Bradbury is placed in the fifth position, which is the worst starting point, and he adopts the same strategy and he hangs back again. Olympic commentators assumed he's just simply outclassed. Then, on the final corner, one of the lead skaters attempted an aggressive move, and this skater clipped another skater named Oplo Ono. How's that for a name when something bad happens? Oh no, oh no. Well, the four lead skaters pile into one another. Bradbury skates cleanly around them, and boom, gold medal. Australia's first Winter Olympic gold. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, for time and chance happen to them all. The preacher isn't saying preparation doesn't matter. Bradbury proves that. If he'd quit after nearly bleeding to death, no gold medal. If he retired after breaking his neck, no gold medal. If he hadn't trained for years, if he hadn't shown up, no gold medal. But the preacher would also say preparation alone doesn't guarantee victory. Sometimes the fastest lose. Sometimes the strongest fall, just like David and Goliath. Sometimes time and chance happen for good or bad. Sometimes it works out in our favor, and other times it doesn't. You can't control time and chance, but you can control whether you're prepared when opportunity arrives. Stephen Bradbury didn't win because he got lucky. He won because when the time and chance showed up, there was a prepared man who trained to be there, doing what he loves. And I think that's very close to what the preacher is saying. Ecclesiastes doesn't deny chance. It denies the illusion that life is perfectly predictable. Wisdom isn't controlling the future or trying to control everything around you. It's faithfully preparing for whatever future God allows. That's why Bradbury's story resonates so well with Ecclesiastes 9:11. It holds hard work, humility, strategy, and uncontrollable circumstances together without pretending that any one of them tells the whole story. So, what does this wisdom tell us to do? How should we live? Work hard, prepare, show up. Time and chance will have their way. Some days it benefits you, other days you lose out. But ultimately, it's outside of your control. But enjoy it. Enjoy life. How does this wisdom from Ecclesiastes now connect to Jesus and the good news of his death and resurrection? If you're familiar with the gospel, you know that Jesus defeated death. Jesus willingly placed himself in death's classroom. Philippians 2:7 and 8 tell us, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Philippians 2 tells us that he accepted that death on the cross was his mission and it was the will of the Father. It was facing death that Jesus knelt down and prayed, "Let this cup of death pass by me, yet not my will, but your will be done." Jesus didn't use a loophole to get out of death. He went willingly, like a lamb led to slaughter. He entrusted himself completely to the Father's will. He trusted the person who was pushing the cart. And because Jesus defeated death, death is now no longer your master. If you have placed your faith in Jesus Christ as your Savior, death is no longer your final destination or your final destiny, but death is still your teacher. And every coffin you sit in front of, every car accident you pass by, and every time your body gets sick and starts not working properly, death is reminding you that life is short and whispers, "You are not in control." But because of Jesus, death has no authority. For believers in Jesus Christ, death has no victory over you, just lessons and reminders for you to live with wisdom and with joy today. Death frees you to enjoy God's gifts because life is temporary. So enjoy your meals, enjoy your relationships, enjoy your work, and enjoy God, worship Him. And then don't ignore death. Now, we don't fear death, but we learn from death because Jesus Christ has robbed it of its authority. 1 Corinthians 15:54 and 55 say, "Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" Christians can look death in the face, learn every lesson it has to offer, and still say, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" Ecclesiastes invites you to let death teach you how to live wisely today, while the gospel gives you confidence that death itself has been overcome. So you don't cling anxiously to life, and you don't dare waste it either. We receive each ordinary day as a gift from God and all that is in it, and live it with joy, wisdom, gratitude, and ultimately hope, hope of heaven. We spend our lives with our fists clenched, trying to hold on, trying to control and predict, and trying to protect. But death slowly pries our fingers open, not to leave you empty, but so that God can place today's gifts into your open hands. And so if you're listening to this and you're struggling with controlling something in your life that seems out of control, if you're fearful, if you're anxious about death, I really want to encourage you to send me an email, reach out to me, or reach out to your local pastor, or maybe a counselor that you trust. Start taking steps toward getting connected with someone and with resource. There's lots of resources out there that can get you the support or encouragement that you need. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Again, this was a sermon that I gave in July of 2026 at Church of the Open Door during their Ecclesiastes series.